Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into Bitcoin ETFs? We're going to unpack how these financial giants are shaping the future of crypto. And you might be surprised to learn which one is actually losing billions.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see this kind of shift happening where you have Bitcoin ETFs almost getting like this Wall Street acceptance stamp.
Right. It really makes you wonder why it took so long. But before we even get into the who's who of it all, maybe we should take a step back. What is a Bitcoin ETF? For anyone listening who might not be totally familiar.
Absolutely. Think of it like this. It's basically a basket of Bitcoin, but you can trade it on the stock exchange, just like regular stocks. So that makes investing in Bitcoin way easier than, actually going out and buying it directly. No need to mess around with digital wallets or any of that.
So it's kind of like buying a slice of the Bitcoin pie without having to bake the whole thing yourself.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. And with the SEC finally giving the green light, it brings that much-needed legitimacy and regulation to the crypto space.
Exactly. Regulation was always a big hurdle for a lot of institutional investors, but now we're seeing a ton of them diving in headfirst.
Well, and speaking of diving in, let's talk about BlackRock. Their iShares Bitcoin Trust ETF has pulled in over $50 billion in under a year. What's fueling that kind of insane growth?
Well, for one, they've got a killer reputation. I mean, BlackRock is a behemoth in the financial world. Investors trust them, and they've definitely earned that trust. But it's not just their name. They're also playing it smart. They're attracting investors with incredibly low fees, like we're talking 0.25% compared to some competitors who are charging 1.5% or even more. Plus, they have really tight bid-ask spreads, which basically means the price you pay to buy and sell is very close, so you're minimizing your costs.
So for the average investor, that translates to more money in their pocket, right?
Precisely. Those tiny percentage differences may not seem like much, but over time they can make a huge difference in your returns.
Now, on the other side of the coin, we've got Grayscale. They were like the OGs in this whole crypto investment game. They fought tooth and nail with the SEC to convert their GBTC trust into an ETF, and they won that battle. But here's the crazy part. They're losing assets, like over $17 billion. What gives?
It really all boils down to those fees. Grayscale hasn't adjusted their fees to be competitive with the rates that companies like BlackRock are offering. And investors are noticing, and they're voting with their wallets, moving their money where it can grow more efficiently.
So even being a pioneer doesn't guarantee you'll stay on top in this fast-moving market. That's a tough lesson. So where does all this leave Fidelity? They've always had that steady, reliable presence in the finance world.
And that's exactly what's drawing investors to their Wise Origin Bitcoin Trust ETF. They were early adopters of digital assets, and their track record speaks for itself. People trust Fidelity. They're comfortable investing with a name they know.
It's so interesting how each of these giants is approaching the Bitcoin ETF market with their own strategy. But what does it all mean for the everyday investor? Why should they care about these big players duking it out?
That's a great question. Here's the thing. This isn't just some Wall Street game anymore. The rise of Bitcoin ETFs has made investing in crypto more accessible than ever.
You're saying you don't have to be a tech genius or a finance whiz to get in on the action.
Exactly. And that accessibility is what's driving institutional adoption, which in turn is boosting the legitimacy of crypto as an asset class.
So it's not just about BlackRock, Grayscale, and Fidelity slugging it out. It's actually shaping the entire financial landscape.
100%. And that's why it's so important for anyone who's even remotely interested in investing to understand these dynamics, whether they're into crypto or just traditional markets.
And that's actually a perfect segue to talk about some of the other players in the game.
Yeah.
It's not just the big three making waves, right? We're seeing huge institutional players like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley getting in on the action.
Oh, yeah, big time. Goldman Sachs has already pumped over $400 million into 7 different Bitcoin ETFs, and Morgan Stanley is not far behind with nearly $190 million invested, a big chunk of which is in, yep, you guessed it, BlackRock's fund.
Wow, that's a pretty clear sign that these institutions sense something special in Bitcoin ETFs.
Yeah.
But what's behind this institutional frenzy?
Well, a couple things. First, the SEC's approval of Bitcoin ETFs has cleared up a lot of the regulatory uncertainty, which makes it way easier for them to invest. These institutions have to be really careful about compliance, so ETFs provide that familiar, regulated structure that lets them participate in the crypto market.
Makes sense. And second,
they see the potential returns. Bitcoin's already shown crazy growth, and these institutions are always on the lookout for new ways to diversify their portfolios and grab a piece of that action. Plus, we can't ignore what's happening around the world, all the geopolitical stuff, people losing trust in the traditional financial systems. Bitcoin, with that whole decentralized thing, it's starting to look like a pretty good hedge against inflation and all the economic uncertainty out there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we've got this kind of perfect storm brewing. Regulatory clarity, potential for crazy returns, and a global shift towards alternative assets. No wonder these institutional investors are jumping in. But what does all this new money pouring in mean for the future of Bitcoin ETFs? Are we going to see even more growth, or is this whole thing about to go poof?
Well, it's definitely a wild ride, that's for sure. But the success of Bitcoin ETFs, it's kind of like opening the floodgates. Now we're seeing ETFs that track other cryptocurrencies too, like Ether and Solana.
Oh, wow. So it's not just a Bitcoin game anymore.
Nope, not at all. Investors want in on that diversified crypto action, and ETFs are a pretty easy way to do it. But there are still some hurdles to clear, especially when it comes to regulations, like how do you classify these tokens? Are they securities? The SEC is still trying to figure out how to apply all the old rules to this brand new asset class.
Yeah, that sounds like a whole other headache. So we've got these two forces kind of going head to head. The demand for crypto ETFs is through the roof, but then you've got all this regulatory uncertainty around these newer tokens. What do you think is going to happen?
Tough to say for sure, but I think we're going to see a lot of innovation in this space. New kinds of ETFs are going to pop up, offering exposure to different parts of the crypto market. We might even see ETFs that focus on DeFi, decentralized finance, or ones that track all those privacy coins.
That's wild. So things are going to get even more complex and interesting in the crypto ETF world. But what about those big players we were talking about before? How are they going to adapt to all these changes?
Well, Grayscale's definitely shaking things up. They just brought in a new CEO, Peter Mintzberg, and he's known for, well, let's just say he's not afraid to disrupt things. They're clearly not going to just sit back and watch their market share disappear.
So they're ready to fight back.
Oh, yeah. And they've got some serious ammunition, a massive investor base, deep knowledge of the crypto market, and that legal win against the SEC. They're definitely going to use that to push for some more favorable regulations.
That's going to be interesting to watch. What about BlackRock and Fidelity? Are they just going to chill and watch Grayscale try to catch up?
I wouldn't count on it. Competition is a beautiful thing, It pushes everyone to be better. We can expect them to step up their game. Lower fees, more diversified products, a better experience for investors. It's all on the table.
It's like an epic battle of the titans. But instead of swords and shields, it's all about ETFs and blockchain.
Exactly. And the best part? The real winners are the investors. More competition, more innovation, more opportunities. Everyone wins.
Yeah, that's a great point. We've covered a lot of ground here. The rise of Bitcoin ETFs, institutional investors jumping in, and the potential for even more growth and crazy new stuff in the crypto ETF market. But before we wrap things up, let's bring it back to our listeners. What does all this mean for them? Why should they care?
Here's the bottom line. Crypto isn't just for the techies and early adopters anymore. It's going mainstream, and ETFs are making it easier than ever to get in on the action.
So this is something that, everyday people should be paying attention to.
Absolutely. Whether you want to diversify, hedge against inflation, or just see what this whole crypto thing is about, ETFs are a pretty safe and easy way to get involved.
But, with all this talk about institutions and regulations and all that, it can still feel kind of intimidating, right?
Yeah.
Where do you even start with all this?
Yeah, I get that. First things first, educate yourself. There's tons of info online. Websites, videos, you name it. Find some reputable sources and learn the basics about Bitcoin, blockchain, and ETFs.
Okay, and once you got the basics down?
Then you got to figure out your goals. What are you trying to achieve? Short-term gains, long-term growth, how much risk are you comfortable with? Once you know what you want, you can start checking out the different Bitcoin ETFs out there and pick the ones that fit your strategy.
And of course, it's always smart to chat with a financial advisor, right? Someone who can give you some personalized advice based on your situation.
Definitely. They can help you assess your risk tolerance, figure out a good strategy, and make sure you're making smart decisions.
So even though this whole world of crypto ETFs can seem kind of overwhelming, it's getting way more accessible for regular investors.
For sure. With a little knowledge and some good advice, it's a really exciting opportunity to be a part of this whole financial revolution.
Well said. All right, so as we wrap up our deep dive into Bitcoin ETFs, I want to leave you with one final thought-provoking question. With this whole crypto landscape changing so fast, what do you think the future holds for Bitcoin ETFs and all those other digital assets? Will they just become totally normal, like stocks and bonds? Will we see even more of those big institutions jumping in? Or is there going to be some crazy shakeup that changes everything.
It really is like looking into a crystal ball, huh? Nobody
Yeah.
can say for sure what's going to happen, but we can kind of see where things are headed and make some guesses.
All right, well, put on your prediction hat. What do you see?
Okay, so I think it's pretty safe to say that Bitcoin ETFs, they're here to stay. They've shown what they can do for investors, both the big guys and the everyday folks. So I think we're going to see them keep growing. As for the rest of those digital assets, it all comes down to regulation. If the SEC can figure out some clear rules for how to classify and regulate all this stuff, then yeah, I think we'll see a ton of new ETFs popping up.
So regulation is the big question mark, huh?
Exactly. It could either make things explode or totally slam the brakes. But no matter what, this whole space is moving at warp speed. It's going to be exciting to see how it all plays out.
It's like we're watching a financial revolution unfold right in front of us.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The traditional financial system, it's being challenged like never before. And cryptocurrencies and blockchain, they're leading the charge.
Okay, so for anyone listening who's maybe feeling a little overwhelmed by all this, what's the one thing you want them to remember?
Don't be afraid to jump in and learn. This is such an exciting time in finance. And the more you know about crypto, about blockchain, about ETFs, the better prepared you'll be to make sense of it all.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So keep learning, keep exploring, and don't be afraid to ask questions. The world of crypto is full of possibilities. Who knows? Maybe you'll be part of the next big thing. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Bitcoin ETFs. We hope you learned something new today.
It was great to be here.
And until next time, happy investing.